on the Chris Smith Show. Open House, brought to you by Domain.
Yeah, each Saturday this year, I'll be holding our own open house. I'll invite the country's leading real estate experts in to join me in the studio, and with their thoughts on the market. Doesn't necessarily mean the buyer's market or the seller's market. We're talking the rental market as well. We'll also give you the chance to pick their brains about suburbs you're interested in, no matter where you might be living, and it doesn't matter whether it's Brisbane, Canberra, Sydney, Upper Combukta West. All you've got to do is ring 131 873. Peter O'Malley is a consultant with Harris Partners. They're based in Sydney's Balmain, and he's coming to the studio for us today. Hi, Peter. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Chris.
Good to have you with us. Let's look at the state of the markets firstly. Everywhere I read keeps telling me that Sydney's frantic rise in property values continues.
And it will probably continue for the first half of this year at least, Chris.
Right.
I think we've moved from a recovery mode to possibly being overpriced. I think the recovery's been too strong. Regulators seem happy with that or comfortable with it.
Gee, the lull was short-lived.
As a spectator, it might have been short-lived. As a real estate agent, it felt never-ending. It went on for 2 years, nearly 2 years exactly, from May 2017 to May 2019.
Yeah.
But the second half of last year, our marketplace in the inner west rose 9%. So it was as good as a recovery as I've ever seen.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, that's where Sydney is at. Brisbane. Now, there was a lot of money that was taken to Brisbane during that lull in Sydney's prices, and I know just in terms of sponsorships on this radio station, they were increasing. So there was a real attempt by Brisbane real estate agents to grab the money that wasn't being invested in property during that time.
Yeah, let's go to average dwelling prices around the country, Chris. Sydney's running at 853, whereas Brisbane is running at 500,000. So that's a combination of houses and units. Now, with the Brisbane market, they had a savage oversupply of apartments. And I see the Brisbane housing market is probably going to be the best market in 2020.
Whoa. That's a big call.
I'm really comfortable in saying that. If you go to Brisbane, there's a lot happening there. There's a lot of confidence, and property prices have not really moved in a significant way since the RBA went on this rate-cutting tangent. And young families that are looking for lifestyle will begin to look at lifestyles in Melbourne and Sydney and say we can do a lot better in Brisbane.
And get better value in Brisbane. That's interesting. So should people who have a little bit of money and are thinking about, say, purchasing an investment property, should they bite now?
As far as Brisbane housing goes, I would say yes.
Okay.
A few years ago, I tipped some friends into Hobart. I think Hobart is at or near full value. Canberra's been great for investors in the last 3 years, but I'm now Brisbane housing as far as investment goes.
Gee, you were right about Hobart. Everywhere I read tells us that Hobart has skyrocketed in terms of their prices, and there are lots being done down there to construct new dwellings.
Well, they need to, because the population growth and the confidence in the Hobart market is now demanding more development, which probably signals the peak of the market, because one of the things that fueled Hobart was unemployment rates were improving, and as that improved, there was no new dwellings to help with the housing demand that existed there.
Yeah, right. Okay, they needed to increase supply for the demand. All right. Let's talk Canberra. You mentioned before that there were some moves recently certainly your recommendation was to get into Canberra property. How's it looking now for 2020?
I think it's looking very fully priced. If we go back to dwelling prices around the country, Sydney 853, Melbourne 672, Canberra 620. So Canberra is nearly as expensive as Melbourne, and I think that's unjustified. One of the things that happened with the Canberra market, Chris, is they scrapped stamp duty and moved to a broad-based land tax. So what that did is it brought a lot of demand forward as investors said, hey, there's a good rental return down in Canberra, and we don't need to pay stamp duty. But the longer we go on, the broad-based land tax will have an effect, and I think it could potentially create some selling pressure. Okay,
so be very, very careful about purchasing property in Canberra, sounds like the message. If you've got a question for Peter O'Malley, consultant with Harris Partners, now's the time to jump in. Best to get in nice and early before we run out of time. 131 873. Sydney rents are at their lowest level in years. what factors should you consider before making the leap to buy, say, your first home from a rental scenario?
You need to acknowledge that if you purchased your first home and could not afford it financially, there's no real respite in the rental market because yields are so low. The vacancy rate in the country is highest in Sydney. That's an overhang of the oversupply of apartments that have happened. Landlords have never had it tougher as far as costs rising and rents falling, and tenants have never had it better.
That's interesting. I've got a little investment property and I had to take my rental level down at the recommendation of the real estate agent because they said, hey, listen, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of choice out there. There's better choice than what you're offering. And so you've got to be a little bit more sensible and a little bit more reasonable about your rental price.
Yeah, I have great empathy for Sydney landlords at the moment because they have been hit with skyrocketing costs, land tax, which is not the least of those. And every time their property comes up for relet, they're looking for a higher price. And as you've just outlined there, in many cases, they're actually having to take less to secure a tenant. According
to the Domain rental report for the December quarter, Sydney's median unit rent is down $40 from its peak after dropping 1.9% over the past 3 months and 3.8% over the year. It's interesting. Across Sydney, house rents have been slashed as much as $95 over the year. So you're exactly right. It's pretty tough. Let's talk to some of our listeners. 131873 for Peter O'Malley. Bill, go right ahead. Peter's listening.
G'day, Peter. I'd just like to find out what are the pitfalls of self-managing a strata fund of 3 units.
First of all, the liability that you take on. You need to ascertain what sort of money you would save in doing that. Are you going to self-manage yourself, Bill?
Yes, myself and another owner are going to manage 3 adjoined units.
Yeah, I recently had a situation in Glebe where there was one owner managing the 3 units, and ultimately he ended up being a debt collector for the other unit holders that lived overseas that weren't paying their bills. And nobody really wants to act as a debt collector against their neighbours. So I would say, from experience, what I've seen, that's the major pitfall, is if people are not carrying their weight bill, there is no strata manager to outsource the debt collection to. You've got to do it yourself.
Yeah, that's we've got good relations with all the owners. Basically, we're saving about $9,000 a year.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, you've got good relations at the moment, but when owners change and people's circumstances change, that's where risks rise.
Yeah, I got burnt once upon a time, and I'll always make sure that a professional is dealing with, the collection of rent. Bill, thank you very much for your call. Let's go to Margaret. Wanting to downsize, Margaret.
Yes, I was just wanting to know, I'm looking at downsizing from a home to something a little bit with less maintenance. And I've noticed that the apartments these days have quite large levies or strata fees on them. I'm just wondering, do the fees apply similar to, say, what do you call them?
A villa?
A duplex or a villa, yes.
Yeah, I say to my clients quite often, Margaret, that villas, which tend to be single level, villas are the most desirable yet least available product in the Sydney market because we tend to build vertically when people such as yourself are looking to live on one level. I applaud you for looking at this market with a view to selling. I, as I just mentioned in the intro, think the Sydney market is heading towards overpriced territory, and I think for people such as yourself that are looking to downsize, this is a great market to sell into. And there are apartment blocks with lower maintenance that won't come with the big strata levies. Now, just because they don't have big strata levies, don't mistake that as a good thing necessarily, because if they're running short on maintenance and upkeep, you'll end up getting hit with special levies down the track, which tend to be more expensive in the long run in any case. So you need a good real estate lawyer, not just a lawyer, but a good real estate lawyer that can really scrutinise the strata history for you and tell you whether the block is well run or whether it's got issues buried in its future.
Right, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that.
Good on you. Thank you, Margaret. We've got to take a break. 131873. We'll talk about the decline of the Aussie backyard and also the apartment market right after the break with Peter O'Malley. And coming up, we'll talk sport as well. It's 27 to 1. Goes quick on this program. Good to have your company. Saturday afternoon in Sydney, of course, still the morning in Brisbane, but it's great to have your company. Chris Smith, broadcasting Saturday, Sundays on the network.
End Sunday. Hurry. Domain's huge half-yearly sale ends Sunday. Don't miss big bargains in bedding. Up to 60% off clearance mattresses and ensembles from big Australian-made brands Sealy, King Coil and Sleepmaker. Amazing price Temper Queen mattresses from just $19.88. Plus choose your Temper bonus. Save up to 50% off bedroom furniture and kids furniture. Up to 60% off pillows. Up to 70% off bed linen plus more in store. Don't miss out. Domain's huge half-yearly sale ends Sunday.
So for the kitchen, I'm thinking a soft pale lemon.
I'd go with brown.
The bathroom has to be that classic porcelain grey.
Brown for that too.
And the bedroom, a beautiful midnight blue.
Oh, that has to be brown.
What? Brown? For everything?
Well, yeah. Who else would you use but Mr. Brown's Painting?
The gentleman of the painting industry for more than 56 years. Mr. Brown's Painting. Call 9637 5633 or mrbrownspainting.com.au.
Whatever you love most about your community, there's a good chance your local club loves it too. New South Wales clubs contribute $100 million each year to a range of worthy causes through the Club Grant scheme, supporting everything from junior sporting teams to schools, charities, hospitals and seniors organisations. They also provide direct employment opportunities for 42,000 people across the state. Because just like you, your local club is made local. Search Your Local Club on Facebook or visit yourlocalclub.com.au.
Well, health insurance premiums are set to rise again in April 2020, so now's the time to see if you can get better bang for your buck. The 50 Up Club has you covered with a brand new special health insurance deal with the country's biggest not-for-profit health fund. Take up a new hospital and extras policy with HCF now via 50upclub.com and you'll get up to $400 in e-gift cards as a reward. That's a $400 e-gift card for families, couples and single-parent families who take up a new combined policy with HCF at 50upclub.com and stay for 3 months. That's it. There's also a $120 e-gift card for singles. Terms and conditions apply. Waiting periods may apply. Only at 50upclub.com and only for a limited time.
Hello, I'm Jo Moxey, Westpac State General Manager for Regional New South Wales and ACT. Here's an update for Westpac insurance customers affected by the recent bushfires. I'd like to assure you that Westpac Home and Contents Insurance does cover fire damage across all levels of cover. We're here to help, so please call us on 1300 369 989.
Westpac Home and Contents Insurance is issued by Westpac General Insurance Limited. Conditions, limits and exclusions apply, including waiting periods for new policies. Consider the product disclosure statement at westpac.com.au for further details or to see if it's right for you.
The Lexus 8-day event is on now. Receive a $5,000 contribution towards select Lexus models. Ends January 23. Visit your local Lexus dealer. T's and C's apply.
I never thought living in a retirement village would work for me. But not my thing. It turns out I didn't really know what I was saying no to. Retire Australia communities offer me the lifestyle I want, with the support and community that really matters to me. Do you know what you're missing out on? Visit Belrose Country Club for yourself. Learn more at retireaustralia.com.au/find out.
You're listening to The Chris Smith Show on 2GB 873.
Yeah, good to have your company on this Saturday afternoon in Sydney, Saturday morning in Brisbane. We're looking at real estate in this part of the program with Peter O'Malley, who's a consultant with Harris Partners in Balmain in Sydney. But if you want a question answered and you want to talk about property in Canberra, Sydney, Brisbane, maybe the Gold Coast, go for your life. 131 873 is the telephone number. There's a story around today in one of the papers, Peter, about the great Australian backyard being no more, the casualty of sky-high property prices, and it is a change in culture, isn't it? So we were all brought up in the backyard, had backyard cricket. That was the way it was, but more and more kids are coming and living in apartment buildings.
They are, Chris, and including townhouses as well. In that article, it spoke about the average block size in the past being 1,000 square metres, and the reality is that 1,000 square metres is essentially a development site in most parts of the country at the moment, particularly as we're seeing in the Hills District in Sydney at the moment. If 3 or 4 neighbours get together, then you've got essentially a unit site, which is highest value use. And a vendor, quite rightly, will always go to highest value use when they're selling their property. So I'm not sure that Australians don't necessarily want a backyard as much as they can't quite afford a backyard because it's a luxury that you can get through other ways, such as local parks.
Yeah, exactly. Larry's got a question for you about Brisbane. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, hi, Peter and Chris.
G'day.
Hi, Larry. I have an older style walk-up 2-bedroom unit in Paddington in Brisbane, which I purchased in 2015 and for $410,000, and it's done nothing but go backwards, and obviously the oversupply and the rent's gone backwards as well. And I was just wondering, you think it's worth to hold it, or cut it at a loss? I just had on the market last year, actually a couple of about a month ago, and the offers just were quite below that.
What were the offers, please, Larry, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, they were like sort of about 360, I think 370.
Okay, see, the investment has gone back 10% in the last 5 years. Thanks for sharing your story. It's not easy to ring the radio and tell people that you're sitting on a losing investment like that, but it is a warning to people that property does not always go up. I'm a believer in the suburb and have in the past owned property in Paddington in Brisbane, and I believe in the suburbs. So you've got a great location, Larry. I don't know much about the specifics of your unit, of course. May I ask, does the rent that you're receiving pay the mortgage on the property?
No, I'm negatively geared,
You're negatively geared. And can you afford that negative gearing component in your personal finances?
Yes, I can, yeah. The unit's a little bit small in size as well, which could be a bit of an issue.
Look, a rising market will lift all boats, so to speak. A rising tide lifts all boats. So when the oversupply in the Brisbane market is fully absorbed, which it's actually close to being so, and rents are starting to rise in Brisbane, I probably think that you've seen the worst of it. If I was advising you today, I wouldn't suggest you go out and buy a unit in Brisbane, but given that you already own one and you've already paid stamp duty to get in and you'd take a capital loss to get out, I probably wouldn't advise you to sell it unless you're looking to offset capital gains elsewhere. Is that something that's happening for you, where you potentially got another asset where you'll get big capital gains tax bill?
No, not really. I do have, a couple of investments in Parramatta as well, just units, and they're suffering a bit of oversupply there as well. And but I would consider if I could, possibly get out of it. Even what do you think of the for a house in the Redcliffe area in Brisbane?
Look, I think that's got good prospects. If you're running negative geared on these investments and they're underwater, so to speak, as far as what you paid and what they're worth, I'd look to trade through. I'd look to trade through this in the next 12 months. Yeah, you'll trade through it. I've got to move on, Larry. I've got other callers to get to. Interesting. I want to talk about apartments. 2019 has been notorious for apartments, especially in Sydney. We've had major construction dramas. We've had flammable cladding issues and an oversupply, haven't we? Yeah, we have, Chris. It's not a good story at all, and Larry just shared his experience with us there, and he's certainly not the only person in that boat. There's 440 buildings in New South Wales that have flammable cladding to one degree or another, Chris, and how the state government are going to deal with this issue will come to the surface in 2020, and if they... If their view of dealing with this issue is to hit the existing unit owners with a special levy, which is what I think their solution will be, that will create further selling pressure in the apartment market. Now, low-rise, older-style units that are well located will always do well, but brand new high-rises that are hit with special levies because of flammable cladding, that will be an issue for the market.
Yeah, I could just imagine. I've run out of time, but it's fantastic to have you in here, mate. Thank you very much, and we'll call on you quite frequently, so keep the phone open for us.
Thank you, Chris. Look forward to it.
Good on you. Peter O'Malley, a consultant with Harris Partners, who are based in Balmain in Sydney, but very, very happy to share his wisdom about markets like Canberra, Brisbane, and it's terrific to have him here in our open house segment. It's 17 to 1, 17 to 12 in Brisbane. Right now, Beaumont Tile